All right, so I've got 11:01. We want to get started as close to on time as we can. I think there might be a few more people still joining in, but welcome to the IMAGIN Webinar Series. And today we have Susan Benston from Kieser Associates presenting on encouraging conservation through alternative drain apportionment. Want to go through just a couple of quick slides of housekeeping and announcements for you, and then we'll have Susan give her presentation. Want to just remind you that we've got a couple of upcoming presentations. So we actually have these webinars scheduled all the way through April, and we're going to be getting some notice out to get some more presentations going through the late spring and into early summer. But coming up on February 11th, oops, went forward a slide. February 11th, which is a new date, it's pushed back 1 week, is Brooks Kelly presenting on processing building plans using FME server. We had to move the date because on the 4th, where it was scheduled, there's going to be a state of Michigan meeting that a lot of people will be attending. So we didn't want to conflict with that. So we pushed that back 1 week. Then on Thursday, February 18th, we have Brownfields to Brightfields, Recycling Land to Productive Use by Ryan McNeil of the State Land Bank Authority. So if you're interested in those, check out the IMAGIN website at imagine.org, go to the webinars tab, and then you can register for those. The webinar is being recorded, and so just take note of that. Also, if you have questions, you should see either a chat or questions box. And in those question boxes, we'll be monitoring that. With me today is Eric Kearney from the board, and Eric and I will be monitoring those. And then a couple of times through the presentation, Susan indicated she'll grab questions. And then certainly at the end, we will do that as well. And my slide keeps jumping because I bumped my mouse. So again, check out imagine.org for the webinar series. And with that, I'm going to hand over presentation over to Susan.
All right. We'll get going then. I want to thank everybody for coming today and having an interest here. And before I really dig into the topic, I want to acknowledge that this couldn't have happened without the team that I'm working with. We at Kieser Associates have a huge support team that's working with us on this. Matt Mearsman at the St. Joseph River Basin Commission, Aaron Fuller at Van Buren County Conservation District, the Van Buren Drain Commission Office, the LaGrange County Surveyor, and of course the Great Lakes Protection Fund, which is providing the financing and holding the intellectual property rights for the work that we've been doing on this for the last 3 years. And this work is based on work that was started back in 2016. Matt and Aaron were co-authors on a journal article that described some of the work that they had been doing on supporting agricultural conservation practices through drain apportionment, and the citation for that article will show up later in the presentation, so you'll get to see that and note it later. Michigan, like most of the Midwest, oh, I skipped a slide. Where'd my outline go? Sorry about that. What we're going to talk about is an intro to drains and drain apportionment, and then how we came up with the land cover and outputs that the drainage authorities need. And then we'll go over the use-based alternative drain apportionment pilot that we've done recently. We've done a couple in Indiana, and talk about how when you include best management practices as additional discount factor options, it really can boost environmental benefit. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the idea of a regulated drain. Michigan, like most of the Midwest, is completely covered with them. Each county has a drain commissioner that is responsible for drain maintenance and assessing the fees for that maintenance. And each of those drains has its own little watershed, its own drainage district that the residents of that drainage district are responsible for the fees that maintain that drain. And here you see an example of the drains in Van Buren County, Michigan, in green, and they pretty much are spread well across the county. And if we had the layer of watersheds, you would see that they almost completely cover the county. And in some counties, in the St. Joseph River Basin where we're working, they do cover almost the entire county. The drain authorities divide the fees for projects to maintain the drains. They apportion them among the residents according to the drain code. And the Michigan Drain Code says that all those apportionments shall be based on the principle of benefit derived from the drain. So how does that translate to real life? Well, currently it's usually based on static factors, things that don't change, like the acreage of your parcel. And there's that tax credit, the basis for this project. In the real world, however, the benefit to the parcel from the drain can change based on how that parcel is used and managed. For example, if you have a pasture, doesn't matter so much if there's some parts of that pasture that are underwater sometimes. The cattle can just kind of walk around that wet area. But if you change that into row crop, it does matter suddenly whether that parcel is underwater at times. And it matters to the drain because the outputs from that parcel are going to be different. There's going to be maybe more runoff, more sediment deposition, because that parcel is going to be tilled up and treated differently because of that management. Technology that we have now, as compared to say in 1956, makes it easier to understand how each parcel is benefiting from the drain at any given point in time. We can see that dynamic change as opposed to the static acreage information. And models like the Hawks hydrologic and water quality system model can predict sediment and water runoff that's going to the drain. And GIS systems can determine how the land use is changing over time. And I'll go over next how we put that together for the alternative drain apportionment calculations that we've done. Typically what we have used is we've taken the total drain appropriation or the total project cost and divided that into a base fee and a flexible fee. The base fee represents a percentage of the total cost that is spread evenly among the parcel owners. It's the part that everybody has to pay for no matter what size their parcel is. So everybody's going to have the same postage fee for the mailings. The drain commissioner is going to have the same fee for keeping their office lights on no matter how big your parcel is. So those types of fees are represented in the base fee. And the flexible fee that makes up the remainder of the cost is the part that depends on the benefit more directly. And that's made up of the use, the need, and the management factors. And those factors are set using the Hawks model, which is based on SWAP and GIS analysis. We use, for the use factor, that's determined by their land cover or land use. For the need factor, we look at soil, whether the soil that the parcel contains is well or poorly drained. And for the management factor, the drain commissioner can look at what types of conservation practices an ag parcel might be implementing that would decrease inputs into the drain. And I'm wondering, because that's kind of a lot in a short time, if anybody has any questions so far.
I haven't seen any yet, Susan. So again, if you have any questions, post them into that question and chat panels, but I don't see anything yet.
Okay, I'll just keep powering through. The area that we looked at for our analysis is the 15 counties that include the St. Joseph River Basin. And for our Hawks analysis, we did the St. Joseph River Basin and the surrounding river basins. And the reason for selecting that is that drain commissioners, and in Indiana, it's county surveyors, do their work based on the county footprint, not the watershed footprint. So we wanted to give them something that they could use for their whole county, not just for a part of their county. We wanted it to be the most effective possible for them. So the rest of this analysis applies for the 15 county footprint layers. And to generate the land cover layer, we used the cropland data layer, some information from OpenStreetMap buildings, and the soil layer from Web Soil Survey. And we'll go through that kind of a step at a time. So for the cropland data layer, we used an ArcGIS model builder model, and this monster would have looked a lot more elegant if I had thought to use an iterator, maybe next time, but we'll walk through this just a step at a time. We used the 5 years of the cropland data layer because we were trying to capture some of that dynamic change and not just get a 1 year snapshot of what was happening on the land. And first thing we did was clip that data layer to an area that we could reasonably work with, and then project it to the projection that we wanted to use. And then came reclassification. There are 255 values in the cropland data layer, of course. About half of them are classified as other, while the other half are values that matter to the model, because what we're trying to get down to is 4 different classifications: natural, pasture, row crop, and developed. And so the second, it's been trying to pop in there, the second reclassification we did was to take all those others and classify them as being similar to their nearest neighbors of those remaining 4 classifications. So that at that point we have just the 4 classifications that we wanted. We then clipped the counties to the 15 counties and calculated the mean of the 5 years. The second calculation you see there is the maximum And that was just because we were curious about what the difference was between the average and the maximum. The other thing we realized is that while we're looking at this 5-year snapshot, there's also going to be a time lag between that 5 years and when the apportionment actually is completed. And so to accommodate changes that would happen, we wanted to give folks a way to introduce those changes. And we opted for OpenStreetMap as a way for people to add additional information to the land cover layer. And that would be something that they could present at the last minute right before an apportionment was going to be completed. But at the time that we're putting the model together, we simply used the Microsoft US Buildings footprint layer and found that that did increase the accuracy, particularly for developed areas within the more rural areas, because that layer had a lot of little buildings hiding in the woods that the cropland data layer just couldn't pick up. We then turned to the need, and sorry, my mouse is just touchy today. We turned to the need, and that I just unplugged it. The well and poorly drained soils we identified on the basis of the Web Soil Survey classification of the hydrologic soil group. So that looks at runoff potential and any area that the soil was a D soil or showed high runoff potential, we classified as poorly drained. And if the soil group was any of the other groups, A, B, or C, then we classified them as being well drained. And if it was a split, then we just put it in the poorly drained category. The last step there in getting our land cover layer was to put those all together with a union. We converted the cropland data layer to a polygon and then unioned the 3 layers to generate a land use and soil type footprint for each county. And what we have here is all the different land use and soil type combinations represented for each of the full county footprints. Of course, that's not going to do a drainage authority much good just as a pretty picture. So our next step then is to generate the output that's actually needed to complete an apportionment. And this has to be timed just prior to the actual apportionment due to the likelihood that parcel layers are going to change. There are so many splits and changes to parcels that you can't just do that ahead of time. So what you see here is one of the LaGrange County drains, the Wayne Miller drain that we did. And we've got the parcel layer there, the drain outline for the drain watershed or drainage district, and the land use and need layer as well. And we'll go through now how we generated the GIS map and Excel table for their apportionment using a combination of GIS and web app tools. We created a script within ArcGIS Toolbox that unions all the parcels within the drainage district with the land use layer and calculates the acreage of each polygon within the drainage district. So the user simply adds those three shape files, and the output is a shapefile of the drainage district and a CSV that is then added to the web app. And the web app gives an output of the percentages or fees for each parcel. The fees are based on factors determined by the Hawks analysis, and the factors can be adjusted by the drainage authorities. That's one of the options. And another option is to add discount factors for the BMP implementations, and the output can be used to generate meeting notices, tax letters, to review different statistical qualities of the apportionment. And at this point, I'd also like to see if there are any questions that might have come in about how this all comes together.
Sure, Susan, we do have a few questions that have come in.
Sure.
And so the first one is, can you just explain again what the Hawks and SWAT stands for again? I know you hit that a little bit, but just to tell us that again.
Sure. The Hawks and SWAT are, SWAT is actually the underlying model for Hawks, and they are both methods that model the runoff and sediment deposition from a watershed to a receiving water body. So what they helped us determine, if you look here, we have at the bottom of the web app, we have the natural land is getting a certain percentage of the fee. The pasture that's well drained is getting another factor. Pasture that's poorly drained has a slightly higher. Row crop that's well drained has a different factor. Developed land that's poorly drained has a factor of 1. So those factors were set through the Hawks analysis, and that's something that was done separately from the GIS analysis. It's an online tool, and you put in the factors related to the land, the use, the soils, and it lets you know what those factors should be.
Okay, sounds good. Next question is, does impact on the drain affect fees assessed at all? So when you're doing these, does the impact on the drain actually affect the fees that are assessed?
It does in terms, and the way it does is by is through those factors. So the impact on the drain of a developed, poorly drained soil is going to have more runoff, and so it has a higher fee factor, whereas a natural property is going to have less runoff, potentially, and so it has a lower factor. The fee is going to be multiplied by 0.25 in this case, or 0.2, it's hard for me to see. Yeah, 0.25, whereas the fee for the developed land is multiplied by 1. So there's sort of a discount given to those parcels or those portions of parcels that are on natural land or well-drained pasture land versus developed land or row crop land that might have more runoff, more sediment deposition.
Okay, good. Next question, it's from the same person, but there's kind of two questions. So the first one was, can you explain again what is the basis for your base benefit factor?
The base factor is, or the base fee, I think, might be what they're asking about, and that is a fee that's charged to everyone equally, and that is to cover costs that are not impacted by runoff or sediment deposition. So no matter the size of your parcel, the postage and cost to generate the tax notices is going to be the same, whether you live on a parcel that's less than an acre or a parcel that's 200 acres. And so the base fee is the same for everyone on the basis of that type of fees that are the same for everyone. And then factors that are variable based on acreage or land use type fall into the use, need, and management section of the fee. I hope that answers that part of the question.
Yeah, hopefully. And the second part of that kind of, and I think maybe you were hitting on it if we're understanding the question correct, was the second part was, can you give examples of costs or considerations included in a base benefit? So I think you kind of hit on that. That question was from Claire. Claire, if that wasn't answering what you want, throw another question up there and we'll try to follow up with that again. So, and then one more question we have right now is, does your drain apportionment application, or between the GIS and then the apportionment web app, does it output to a format that can be used to upload into a tax software, such as maybe BSNA as my guess, but at least for Michigan.
Yeah. What we've done so far is we've worked with the folks in LaGrange County to make sure that it was in a format most recently that worked for them. And as we work with different counties, we try to make sure that we give them an output that's going to work for whatever they need for their use. So it's so far been adjusted to the customer that we're working with at the time.
Okay, that sounds good. And I can just throw into, for Michigan, if you're using BSNA, BSNA has some generic import tools that a standard CSV text file can be uploaded into the various programs. You just have to have a very specific format, which I'm sure could be customized, like you said, Susan. So
yeah,
good. That is all the questions I am seeing right now.
Okay, well, I'll move on then to talk about the pilots that we've done. And I feel kind of at a disadvantage because all our pilots lately were in Indiana. I really wish I could be talking about Michigan, but the Michigan pilots we did quite a bit earlier. And so I want to give you the most updated information. We did 4 recent drain projects in LaGrange County, and we reapportioned 400 parcels for those 4 projects. It covered 4,700 acres, and the project cost combined for the projects was $93,000. That was redistributed based on land use and soil type as opposed to simply the straight acreage. And what you're seeing here is one of the handout maps that we used on the Drain Commission meeting day, sort of like the day of review that they have in Indiana. And it was for the Clinton Case Drain. And each of the parcel owners was able to match their parcel with this map ID number to their information without having their personal information, like their owner name or anything, actually on the map or on the information that was available at the time. They could just look up the number on the map, find their house on the map, and then or their parcel number on the map, and then go to the list and look at the information that matched up with that number. We also were able to give them information about the per acre fees. We did a mean per acre fee for each land use type after the base fee, and the county surveyor set their base fee as $20 per parcel for this assessment. So all the parcels, no matter their size, paid $20 for their base fee. And then after that $20, each acre, depending on what type of soil and land use they had, paid a different rate per acre. And that we put right on the map so people could see what that information was and help make sense of how it was going to impact their individual fees. So when we looked at a breakdown of how that impacted the fees, it shifted the burden from the parcels that were less drainage intensive to parcels with land use and soil type combinations that had greater drainage needs. And we have a little pie chart here of what those changes were, and how you see that change depends on how you slice the pie. If you slice the pie vertically, about 55% of the parcels were charged less under the new method. And if you slice the pie horizontally, then and look at the bottom half, about 56% of the parcels were charged roughly the same. So half the people paid within $10 of what they would have paid anyway. And a few folks paid considerably, like $100 with more or less than they would have. And for those folks that paid the additional $100 or more, they are likely folks who lived on or owned large row crop parcels, and we'll look a little bit further at an example of how some of that works. In this case study, we are sticking with the Clinton Case Drain, and we're going to look at the parcel that's contributing the most sediment to the drain, which is this one highlighted in red. If they were to install field border and switch from conventional to no-till and receive a fee discount based on that BMP installation. The model results showed that including that BMP in the apportionment and giving them that management credit can create benefits for the taxpayers as well as for the environment. And the environmental benefit is 178, 2.8 tons of sediment is removed from the receiving water of the drain. And the average yearly maintenance would go down due to that decreased sediment input. So if the drain commissioner passes that yearly maintenance savings on to the residents of the drain, then the owner of the parcel installing the BMPs reduces their fee by 38%, and all the other parcels on average can receive a fee reduction of 11% over time. And so our recommendation is that drain authorities adopt this model with the management factor included, and the verification of the BMPs can be included in the project costs as part of putting the whole project and apportionment together. And that is all I have prepared as far as a presentation, and just wondered if there were any additional questions.
Sure, there's at least a couple, one or two that came in at least, and if there are more, we still have a few minutes, so if you have a last minute question, feel free to send that in. One question, back on slide 15, you referenced, so the question is, I'm not super familiar with drain apportionment, but what factors are used in this analysis that are not used in a traditional analysis that was referenced on slide 15?
Okay. In a traditional analysis, rather than looking at the type of land cover, the drain authority usually just looks at what's the acreage of the parcel. They don't consider how the parcel's used to weight who should be paying more. They only look at how big is the parcel. So if you have a parcel that's 100 acres and you're using it for row crops, you're going to pay the same amount as your neighbor who has 100-acre woods, even though the sediment and the runoff coming from those two parcels are probably very different.
And that person that asked that said, thank you, that did answer it. So Jim says, great presentation, and wonders, have you used this in an urban or suburban environment?
So far, we have not used it in any kind of urban environment, although some of the watersheds, the drainage districts have included urban sections, but they have not been offered the opportunity to include urban BMPs. And I think that's definitely an area that could be explored and has some real promise, because I think the same principle holds. I think if people can reduce their inputs to the drain, they can get benefit. And I think they could potentially have that management factor addition. And so I think that would be a really neat next step to take this.
Great, then another question came in is the management factor for best management practices applied only to the maintenance apportionment?
Yeah, that's where the BMPs reside, is kind of in that maintenance, that's kind of third leg of the stool. We've got the land cover in the use, we've got the soil in the need, and we've got the conservation practices or BMPs in the management.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up the questions that I've seen come in. Thank you very much, Susan, for presenting. It's got a lot of great information for those of us that are dealing with drain apportionments. I'm going to grab back the presentation slides and show my screen. And as we wrap up today, I just want to say thank you everyone for attending. I want to remind you that we've got 2 upcoming webinars on the February 11th and February 18th. So check out imagine.org to register for those. And again, Susan, thank you for presenting. If you're willing to share the slides in the next week or so, we'll get the video recording and the slide deck shared up through the Imagine website so everyone can look at that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone for joining.